Yeah, we're going to pick up right where we left off. Biggest thing for me is all of the accurate predictions that we've been
Mm.
making. And then I'm seeing today major Microsoft outage just as Intel is collecting 8 billion as part of the CHIPS Act on Biden's way out. That's interesting to me. You got money flowing over here, you got Microsoft going down. I'm also seeing, and I'll monitor it while we're live here on the show. It sounds like Netanyahu's setting up for a press conference this afternoon. I take all of that and I say Bitcoin's been just hovering right there, right at that 100K mark. Can't seem to break through the ceiling. Don't you feel like a ceasefire would probably send us through the roof? What's your hot take? There's a lot to get to.
Yeah, there's a lot to get to. I mean, and that's not all of that too. When you put it all together like that, I think of it now as like I think I said in a text to you about this metaphor that, with OpenAI very formally taking a lead position in developing a super app, which you and I talked about and called is, they're going to build a browser that everyone has been sleeping on this concept of a browser. We hear about Musk and X as the one app to rule them all. We know about Weibo and other apps that are in China that let you do all these things and they use examples of book hotel reservations and order food and movie tickets and call your friends. It's like, well, I do all of that. I just do it in a clunky way in a browser. But what if the browser was the super app
Yeah.
purpose built to house the apps? So I think of that like battle that's happening literally on the physical battlefield that you're saying, and then Yahoo's going to say something, and that's going to start to cause changes. And I think the way that money's going to start flowing around the world. So similarly, the largest capital raise by OpenAI coming at Google head on at a time when Google is being told by the government that they have to sell Chrome. So it's like there's all these guys pulling levers to force people to sell munitions, browsers, hope. I mean, you tell me, I'm starting to lose my mind here. I'm seeing that these tea leaves are all pointing towards, is this a Thanksgiving to Christmas gist?
Grab a drink. It's time for another episode of Off the Record on the Rocks. Join Michael Toner and Ankarina Lara as we discuss the latest in all things Web3, AI, metaverse, and crypto. Tune out the noise and turn up the signal as we pour ourselves into the future. Better make mine a double.
Rip to the next full moon? Or are we gonna, what do you think?
I'm going to try to piece apart everything you just said, but we talked about the super app. It makes me think of payments. We all know and remember, the original PayPal mafia, Elon Musk being one of them. You've got, all of the PayPal, Block, Stripe, all the residual payment mechanisms, technology, new phone-to-phone payment mechanisms, Apple Wallet. All of that is what makes me think of in the browser or in the chat. If we take our thesis of OpenAI really dominating, or at least AI generally dominating what the browsing experience is going to look like in the next decade, then if I'm chatting with this thing, it needs to have superpowers to go and do stuff on my behalf. If I tell my chatbot, hey, I need to transfer $100 from my savings to my checking, it needs to know a couple of things. It needs to know that it's me, that it's actually me making that request. And then it needs to know my keys. And then it needs to know where I'm putting it, right? I mean, maybe just that. But there are actions. There are agentic actions that would take place. Proof of life is a good one.
Am I holding the phone in front of your lifeless or soon to be lifeless eyes and face while I drain your PMA checking? And do I have a two-factor authentication when I'm talking to my personal GPT? How does it always know it is me and not just either someone impersonating me or what if it's a GPT that I built that is like me and I just let it talk to my other GPT because I don't have time to anymore? How will it know? It's not the synthetic me.
Look, I think that this idea that you are getting at, the synthetic data, I think I just used the word agents. I don't know if we've really covered this idea of agents inside of this world of AI, but using these new powerful AI tools to then take action. And what you're describing is, well, then couldn't I build a digital twin bring it all
That's
the way
exactly
back
the word,
around,
digital
and
twin.
then that digital twin can go work for me, or better yet, I need 1,000, and I need them to all have my superpowers, my prompting powers, my process, my work, what I do, the tools that I use, now tokenized and now accessible to my 1,000 workers to go do my job for me, right? Hire me, you get my army of toners behind me.
Now that you say that, I'm realizing that the false prophecy of the year 2000s movie, The Matrix, was kind of the same false prophecy that was told to us in the original Tron from 1984 or whatever that was, which is we all have this idea, you and I and everyone in tech, we've been in tech long enough to know what a user agent is. But we as the user agent think, well, that's Neo. That's me against the virus. But actually what we're describing is no, we had it wrong. We're actually Agent Smith. There is a plurality of us, and we all know Kung Fu. You know what I mean? Like you said, an army of toners. And I literally imagine that scene with all those Smiths running in that like third movie, and Neo having to put a pole in the middle of the ground and like run around and kick them all in the face in some weird computer graphic, little showdown. But what you're describing is just that, right? If you have a digital twin, then why can't I have a plurality of digital twins? And maybe I have ones that are sort of crafted to do specific tasks for me, interact with other agents on the web in a very specific way. I have my government-facing one to talk to the DMV and the parking ticket office. Then I have my romantic one to write poetry to my wife when I'm late bringing the pizza home. Or, you know what I mean? There's actually lenses of you that are amplified. Like you said, your superpower, but they don't have to all be in the same agent.
This really supports my thesis, and I like that word superpower, because every human who's on the internet is unique, and they have their own process, and they have their own set of tools, and they use the browser differently. They browse to this site, and then they come up with this idea, and then they paste it into this site, and then they come up with this idea. Even if you're just a casual internet user, and this takes me all the way around, I don't know if we've ever covered basic attention tokens, but what I just described is value creation that is happening on the internet. I know I've referenced the video the professor did, The Internet is Using Us. And it's that viral video from more than a decade ago about everything you type in, every URL that you type in, every keyword that you feed, every photo that you post, every Foursquare check-in that you feed the algorithm. Big throwback. You are feeding the beast. And now all that data, I know how to go find it. There are so many AI tools out there right now. I literally don't have time to go use and play with all of them. But what I do have are the 4 that I know I can take the audio from this podcast. I can turn them into short form transcripts. I can cut them down into 16:9, and I can auto post them. 4 little steps that used to take me hours. But now I know the 4 that do it. Well, you could go find a different 4. You could go find a different process. Every company, every business has an operational process. Every human has an operational process of how they do their job. And I'll bring that all the way around to Microsoft computers just stopped working. So everybody who had a Microsoft laptop sitting in front of them, just couldn't work. Interesting.
Couldn't work, and couldn't, not just couldn't work, at the most fundamental level. You talk about, the kings. Who are the kings of macros and, programmatic processes? Well, I would say Adobe right up there with Microsoft, right? The ability for you to open a Microsoft Word doc and the amount of iconography and buttons and drop-down windows rivals only Adobe Photoshop. The amount of power that you don't know you have, it's an arsenal of word processing. But then you open it up because all you got to do is just do the DocuSign on the Word doc from your kid's school to let him go to the turkey farm today or yesterday, and you turn it on and it's like, I'm so sorry, little Nathan, but you can't go. But why, Daddy? But why? Because the good people of Seattle are experiencing a bomb cyclone as big as all of Bellevue, and it just blew the windows out and literally on a server floor. And now no one can underline or sign on italicized words across the world. But words will not be formatted today. That's what someone
I
screamed, and they were crying into their children's, holding and hugging them, saying, "Don't worry, don't worry. We'll dress up mom like a turkey and we'll pretend she's at the farm." You know what I mean? It's like mass hysteria.
The power inside of a company like Microsoft, the ability to put ChatGPT, OpenAI at the edge of each of their users, so anyone who has a laptop, and the fact that it is a disjointed, and I'll say that, a disjointed process when you then compare. And we talked about Intel just literally getting 8 billion. When you hear Intel Inside, do you think Apple or do you think Microsoft? When you hear Intel Inside, you no longer think Apple, because they had to create what? Their own chips. And now that chip and that NVIDIA storyline starts to make sense and starts to click for everybody. Oh, the thing that does the processing at the edge on the phone, my secure enclave is my face on this phone at the edge. I need to own that supply chain of data end to end, from the moment I have proof of humanity to the moment it articulates Siri, transfer that $100 to my savings account, and it knows it's me. It knows I'm here. The location matches my last known location. I have proof of humanity. My pulse can be measured, and it can all be collected on that Apple silicone chip at the edge in order to process ultimately whatever I need Siri to do for me. And she's got a long way to go, but I hear there are updates coming.
Well, so I have updated my iOS on laptop, desktop, phones, and now if you're not careful, you don't have your settings turned just so, Siri kind of appears up in the corner with that little pulsing psychedelic glow, and is actually transcribing what you're saying as if you're asking a question. So it's teasing you by showing you at certain times that it thinks you're asking something. So what often happens is I'm on the phone and I'm asking a question of whoever's on the phone. Siri's listening and starting to answer the question for me as if I'm asking the question of Siri. So you have to kind of know when to toggle her on and off. And they teach you with commands like, just double tap the command button and you'll see her, or you can go away. But they kind of flow walk you into these little surprise and delight moments when she appears. But let's put that aside for one sec, because I want to pick up where you just left off. I love this. It's like you're just describing the new metaverse funnel. You're describing like, look, you're a marketer. We've how many times have we sat through meetings where some genius has a new version of the marketing funnel that no one's ever seen, but maybe it's on its side. It could be upside down. Sometimes we had the inverted funnel because we had to make some point, right? Sometimes you have the regular funnel. Sometimes it's going the other way, right? Because maybe you're giving the presentation in Israel. Who knows? So but the idea is that there is some amount, like you said, this procedural. It's like a process of distilling down the data, the request, the tools and resources that will be called upon to facilitate until you get to that last little point at the tip, which is that $100 needs to go somewhere. Which gets me to thinking about something we talked about after we got off the call last time, are these appointments that are being made to key parts of the government right now and how those are kind of in question. And one of the ones that really piqued my interest was the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, which is something I didn't know too much about until I read the articles. His name is Howie Lutnick. Why is Howie Lutnick interesting? Well, he's been tapped to be the Secretary of Commerce. Why is that interesting? Well, he is 100% Tether. And we talked about Tether as something from years ago, one of the very first payment processing platforms, blockchains. I mean, I think it was purpose built to basically dollar stablecoin peg, if you will, to the United States dollar, which at one point
tethered
in time,
to the dollar. Right.
It was
exactly.
there you go. It's tethered to the dollar. But at one point in time, it was considered bad because it was de-dollarizing the United States, right? If it's not a dollar, but it's like a dollar, well, that's a bad thing. That's an enemy of us. Well, now this guy comes in, he's the head of the Secretary of the economy, of commerce. And he is approaching it as not just, hey guys, I'm the Tether guy, but he's saying, hey, I'm the Bitcoin guy. And he's starting to talk about DeFi and staking to give loans, which is something that you and I talked about. Like, hey, your crypto, your keys, your crypto. Hey, if you have a Bitcoin in the future, we said, look, there's going to be a mechanism, the micro banks, the personal banks, like your next door version of Lending Tree, because you can borrow money from people in your neighborhood physically if you want, like literally around you, who have some amount of Bitcoin staked, who are willing to lend you money. And this guy's saying, yeah, we're going to do that with these
Yeah.
Tether loans. So now the question is, okay, the bottom of your funnel, that $100 that you transferred to me, is that coming through a process that's being converted into Tether because that's sort of America's flavor of Bitcoin? You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like we're a lot of players here trying to become the payment layer. That
Yes,
payment layer that you described over so many times. And that's the source of truth, because we're talking about the truth layer as well as the payment layer. But if I'm wondering if those two things are one and the same.
they are becoming one and the same. I think the Jake Paul, Mike Tyson fight and the Polymarkets established around the election and that fight and those two ends of that extreme, we can both predict the presidential win of the United States, and we can put our money where our mouth is on Jake Paul for the win. And when money is put into that kind of a market to make a prediction, people only put their money up if they think they're going to be right. And if I'm going to put money in it, it better be right. And if I put money in it and I'm wrong, I'm going to lose the money. I'm probably going to be risk adverse. There's value creation happening there. There's a market. I've talked about this for years. New markets getting created. This is one to just identify because it's exists. Markets have existed, but that what you just said, I want to go to another piece of this, but using cryptocurrency, whether it's Tether or whether it's Doge for the Department of Government Efficiency, and then saying I'm the Bitcoin guy, and we're going to establish a Federal Reserve of Bitcoin. I mean, that to me is showing that this connection of digital and physical currency, digital and physical assets of the real world dollar compared to the digital dollar are starting to become interoperable. So take that metaverse term all the way back around. You're going to be able to buy and sell and bet and transact and prove your identity and prove what you created and prove what you own on chain. And once you've got real world assets on chain and you've got this AI that can start to make sense of it, I can't fully fathom all of the new businesses and markets that can get created from that data.
And when we talk, so I like to call back to something that you told, which is that truth layer. And we were approaching it, I think, a little differently. Let's just say for the sake of argument, we agree that the settlement layer, the payment layer, the value transacted is a proxy for the truth. Because like you said, if the outcome is true and if people benefit financially from that outcome, well, then they have predicted something that was the truth. You can't argue that while it's still kabuki theater, you can't argue that Mike Tyson did not win that fight. Even if all the boxing pundits in the world said, well, just by pure math, he landed more punches than him, so he won. So the truth was that he won. But now what I'm starting to realize, and everyone, I think was shocked by this notion 4 years ago. Now, what am I saying a year ago? Like 4 or 5 years ago, which is there are different versions of the truth, as it turns out, right? Because now if you're saying that the American dollar brings me some sense of truth, but so does Tether, but so does Doge, and so does Shiba Inu and your favorite Pepe, then if your settlement is coming in that layer of the truth, because there are many layers of that truth. I think America wants the dollar to be the top and the most true, but there's definitely, Polymarket's proved it, you can predict real world events via digital assets and find a way to the truth based on the Polymarkets, the plurality of markets that are all steering a whole bunch of different value streams into one signal, and then everyone looking at each other and kind of nodding, everyone collectively in their own little metaverse way, turning the key together and say, the bet's been made. And now look, the outcome is giving us the truth. So my question for you is, well, when do we cross that uncanny divide where we say the poly markets are actually going to be predictive of events that happen in the metaverse and not in the real world? because there's truth to experience in the metaverse. What if I am Polymarket predicting what my digital twin's truth might be?
I think I'm glitching. I
I was
mean,
like,
I
are you
lost it.
okay?
I lost
Someone,
it.
someone get him some water.
I, I, I can't.
You know what I mean? It's the
I can't follow it. Like, I just mean, like, it's mind blowing to me because when you just said layers and the layers of truth, and I think about, well, what do we call Bitcoin? We call it the layer one. What do we call Ethereum? We call it layer two. You know, these other chains, we call them layer twos. Base, Polygon, Avalanche, we call them layer twos. There are layers to the truth when you start to put the truth on chain, and that is going to be an incredible thesis to unpack for the next year as we go into 2025. And to put a real fine tooth on this, one of the things I also saw was that the country of Brazil, so every country right now just FOMOing into Bitcoin, and if the US is going to be, I mean, think about that. You're talking about like geopolitical FOMO. You've got countries right now trying to buy up Bitcoin because all they're seeing is Trump's a Bitcoin president. Cryptocurrency in the United States is here to stay, and Michael Saylor is buying it all.
Michael Saylor. Let's talk about him, Mike. That's a perfect segue. He has more Bitcoin than all the countries combined, doesn't he?
Let's hope he's a good guy. I mean, that's all I can say. Like,
well, if you're in the business of being a country in the world, which we can easily shortlist a dozen, if you want to go from Brazil to Russia to all the BRIC countries or whatever, who are under some form of sanction by the United States, central, Middle East countries like Iran, Iraq, whatever, then you have been buying and using digital currency of some form or another, probably Bitcoin and other things, because you needed to go around the dollar in order to continue running your evil businesses. But then as soon as most of the world, like you say, FOMO's into it, I think my number one indicator is when like random friends who I haven't seen in forever, or like my father-in-law who's pushing 90 tells me, as we're getting ready for Thanksgiving, like, I think now is the time I should buy some Bitcoin. I'm like, oh, now because it's $100,000 and everyone's talking about it on TV, that's when it's too late. But that's when like the countries are like, I feel like they're like those, where have you been, countries? And all of a sudden now you wake up and decide, oh, now we're going to like 10x our ability to get out from under sanctions because finally our crooked money is being validated. We're going to like blow it up. So Michael Saylor's been sitting there smiling. Hey guys, 5.5 more billion to try to catch up.
Do your own research, but you just mentioned the BRIC countries. I started with Brazil, which is how we got to Michael Saylor, but Brazil just introduced legislation to build their own strategic Bitcoin reserve in Brazil. Well, that's really interesting to me because those BRIC countries, we know, do your own financial research, but they have been partnering with Ripple Labs and XRP. And when you talk about truth layer, and we talk about criminals or whatever transactions are happening, if all of a sudden we, the United States, can now identify who the bad actors are we know which of these truth layers, quote unquote, which of these currencies you're using. What about that?
So I like that. So now there's this sort of prestige status of Bitcoin, but then it's like, oh, the BRIC countries, yeah, they use a bunch of XRP. They're still down on Ripple. But hey,
just
our
like
good
we
friends,
do with like pesos, or we used to make fun of like the Argentinian dollar, right?
Yeah, China. No, you guys aren't like Brazil. You guys don't have to use Ripple. No, you guys are using Tether. Tether, that's the Secretary of State truth layer. So you guys are okay to work with us with Tether. Any national friend of ours, international friend, that's Tether. But if you're going to do some of that dirty stuff south of the border, that sounds like XRP. It sounds like Ripple. We're going to watch you. We're going to watch you. And we'll maybe let you convert to Bitcoin every now and again.
This is where we've talked about this because now take Doge, for example. Okay, well, maybe Doge is used as some sort of loans to different governmental agencies in order to get their act together. Then my question is, and you've called this on years ago, what if international criminals own Doge? What if they have some vested interest in staking their Doge or not staking it or buying more of it so that the loans become more expensive? Now you could have international impact. There's an interesting use case to bring that all the way back around to those poly markets and this truth layer and this global economy. it's all starting to make sense to me. We are
It's
in the
starting to make
metaverse.
sense. And when you think about the new age of regulation, like we're so hung up and like everyone's high-fiving and it's like Gary Gensler's turkey's cooked. We called it. It was Thanksgiving, but it was a year off. Doesn't matter. The internet won't remember. We got them. Gary, hope you're cooking your own juices. Ha 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 ha. And off we go. And we're like, we've wiped our hands with guys like that, haven't we? Then of course we'll just sober up by the 20th of January and realize when Congress comes back into session, everyone's tryptophan, they're already seeped out of all their pores. And they're like, how come I smell like mashed potatoes? And how come the United States government is controlling which countries can buy and sell Doge? Because they're going to start to regulate the truth. They're not going to let the bad actors come and mess with the loan values of the Department of Government Efficiency. And how do they do that? Well, I got your eyeball, and Sammy's got your whole iris, and Google's got your fingerprints, and also probably a whole bunch of like really questionable search terms they're going to blackmail you with. And we're going to find a way to basically make it so that only good old Americans or countries that we say are okay in the space race with Musk can buy Doge. What if the regulations become about access, and then you funnel the access that way? It's really easy when you say, wait a second, where did the transaction come from? This chain, I know it's one of 4 countries. Like you could have the United States basically using cryptography to control the layers of truth and transaction processes.
Look, I don't know how we just got there. We find a way every time, but that to me means that this whole narrative around de-dollarization was not true. And at the end, the US dollar reigns supreme and it sits alongside Bitcoin when we have the largest strategic reserve of Bitcoin and the biggest holders and the biggest use cases and the rest of the country's FOMOing in. We get to do both.
And you want to know something that's really interesting? It kind of came to me, a conversation this past weekend, but now it's starting to really crystallize with what we just talked about. Is a good friend of mine is in banking and in like the physical real estate of banking, right? Like doing like the way that you would
Buying
buy
branches.
and sell, the way you would buy and sell branches. And like, how we had that consolidation effect that had happened, I think a couple of summers ago. I'm forgetting on the timeline, but there was a bunch of small banks that failed. It was like right in the wake of FTX. There was a whole bunch of things failing that all needed to be picked up and back on their feet. And everyone was being a hero. Oh, well, you heard about, this big national bank's going to come in and get these smaller banks, and, Washington Mutual's going to be okay. Everybody, we're all going to be okay. Well, one of his comments was, what's interesting about banks? I'm like, yeah, I'm going on my rhetoric of like, yeah, banks are so dumb. They have these vaults and these people behind bulletproof glass. They don't even have your money if you go and ask them. I'm giving, our whole usual diatribe about why banks are so much more environmentally destructive than Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are, which really wasn't the argument he wanted to hear or wanted to make. He's like, I get all that. He's like, but the bank has these vaults that are temperature controlled. And they have all these like sprinkler systems, all these things to basically protect what's in the bank, within the vault. But he's like, well, there's a scenario where the Federal Reserve or whatever this new strategic Bitcoin initiative is buys up, like the way that the Spirit Halloween store buys up failed bookstores and like CVS's or whatever, or Rite Aids. And you just put the strategic Bitcoin reserves, Bitcoin mining servers in all of the bank vaults that are already secure and temperature cooled. Same way that these guys are out, looking for caves in Texas to set up their server. And it's like, wow, what if the physical banks are actually localized Bitcoin mining farms for the communities that they serve? And you start to see then a way of tracking how that data you could easily track now the flow of value. You could easily track the truth if you're the government, and you can access all the on-chain transparent transactions that are happening out of banks, which today, the guy goes to the bank, withdraws cash. All they know is I took cash. What happens after that? They have no idea. There is no truth.
Didn't Orlando start their own coin? Like when you just talked about it from a little city, in the bank becoming the Bitcoin farm. But imagine it was
Miami coin. It was
their Miami coin. Exactly.
It was a city coin initiative, and that's still active, by the way.
So that to me makes sense, right? Where are they mining that? Where are the servers? Who has the keys? Who's holding the
and if
API
you take to the
access?
next level, you say, well, Bitcoin is the top layer. The dollar is, but here's Bitcoin next to it, the digital twin of the dollar. Think about it this way. There's a digital twin of the dollar and it's Bitcoin to the United States dollar. So when you go to the local bank, maybe you're getting Tether or Doge. Maybe you're getting a layer of truth and value that's appropriate for whatever your next transaction or action is. And
Yeah.
again, my point is that the government is going to want very badly for that to happen because they lose sight of the cash when it leaves the ATM. But if it's
Look,
a digital transaction to a new layer, they follow your truth.
I'm going to go to a very weird place, but I do oftentimes put this in the context of my kids. There's an app where you can track the bus. Here comes the bus. And it's a turn by turn. The bus has a GPS on it. And I listened to the superintendent of Fairfax County Public Schools the other day talk about they're going to update this app so that the students, I guess, are going to have kind of like, imagine a little card, a little RFID card that they're going to have to tag on and off the bus. And I thought that's weird. They're not paying for it. Well, they got to keep track of the kids on the bus. And then I thought, well, wait a second. Yeah, it's exactly. And obviously there's safety and security if they can keep track of where students are at any point, which stops they're getting on and off of. But think about any action. When you just said go and take a withdrawal of like, I need to withdraw money to go do my next transaction. Well, that's not how it's going to be. But when I sign up for bus services through Fairfax County, right, maybe I'm paying in my bus token, right? Like because I've volunteered at the bus, working on the buses, or I washed all the buses, right? There's going to be new markets, new ways to create value for the community or for the country that can then be funneled back into these kinds of transactions. I mean,
those transactions you just described, they're either, what we've kind of reduced ourselves to now to bring it all the way back around. You're the mayor of nostalgia with your Foursquare reference check-in. But I'll bring one more, which is what is all of this? I just had this conversation with my mother over lunch last week because as I'm talking about all these things that we talk about in the podcast, because she's listening to it and she's like, wow, you guys are talking about all these things that I really didn't know much about. And it all comes to something very fundamental. It was the truth back when I started on the web before the turn of the century. And that is, it's just ones and zeros. That is, everything that we talk about is binary. And now we have gone to the ultimate scale of that and then come back to a fine point to say, well, it's either a 0 or a 1. Did my kid get off the bus? 1, then it's true. Has my kid got off the bus is the prompt. 0, he's still on the bus. It's very simple truth being told via a layer. So now I'm starting to wonder, did that superintendent of Fairfax County want to chip all the kids? I didn't just say that on the internet, but you know what I mean? It's like, well, are they carrying an RFID card? Why don't they just carry it under the skin on the back of their neck? Tom Cruise. And
wouldn't it be easier?
Wouldn't it be a lot more convenient if you just had a tattoo of a QR code and you go bang and then off you go? But what we're saying is it's coming down to very simple internet technology logic. It's a string of ones and zeros that makes up the digital twin of the American dollar in Bitcoin, and it tells you whether or not the kid got off the bus.
And it's the truth layer to the real world. It is the mesh layer of truth over the real world where I can be able to ask my AI agent anything. Did my kid get off the bus? 1 or 0, and it will know. That is an incredible future. I am going to say, if you can do better than that, we can get predictions heading into Thanksgiving. We've got the holidays coming up. Bitcoin, I'm telling you, if Netanyahu announces a ceasefire, I think you're going to see markets soar.
What if Netanyahu gets up at the podium and like 5 or 6 sort of Keystone Cop looking guys in powder blue military uniforms and white hats from the ICC come jogging in and put him in handcuffs? Now, that would also have a different effect. But I think you're right. I think what my message is to all of our listeners as we head into Thanksgiving is take some time to slow down, to unplug. We talk about digital all the time, but it's a chance to look at people's faces, and not for the purposes of opening up iOS devices, but just to actually connect with real people and pay attention to what the real people in the world are doing. Because I'm predicting that we're going to have a few kind of sort of outrageous stories that feel like they come out of left field as we head into the Christmas, from Thanksgiving to Christmas. And that's going to be indicative of big moves in the government. And I think people, like we like to do, covering up the big moves with weird, fluffy stories and weird news about whether it's UFOs or space exploration or alien bacteria on Mars, or it's going to be something wild and bizarre to distract us from the fact that either there isn't going to be a ceasefire or there's not, or there's a fake one or something. And there's going to be stuff coming out of Ukraine because now you have Zelensky saying, well, now I'm happier than ever because the war will be over sooner. Like, what is that? Why would you say that?
Yeah, that doesn't seem
it's
promising.
a really weird thing to say.
It is coming from the Hill here while we're on the air. It does say Israel-Hezbollah ceasefire to start Wednesday morning. This is from Laura Kelly at the Hill. It doesn't seem
Nailed it.
confirmed, but it does sound like they're going to have a ceasefire starting Wednesday morning, which is very interesting when you have families across America all
just
going
in time
to the table.
Thanksgiving, everyone.
Just in time for Thanksgiving. What's everybody feeling? They're feeling good. They're feeling rich. They're feeling Doge. They're feeling that there's no violence. What are they talking about? The price of Bitcoin around the turkey table. Oh, I'm ready for some gravy and turkey. Let's go.
Let's go, man. I hope your gravy boat overflows, and I'm very thankful for you. Look forward to talking to you next week.
Likewise, we'll do it again.
That's all the time we have for this episode of Off the Record, On the Rocks. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. See you next time for more news and all things crypto and Web3.